Hey, Vincy Lou Who, how are you? So Princess got mad at me a while ago because I told her I had to get off the phone to get to eat and get ready for my live read. And she was pouting because she asked me what time she could call me today or tomorrow. And I told her, and she says, "But you can't talk to mommy." And I was like, "Why not?" "Hi, Teddy." And she's like, "Because you're my friend, not hers. You're my best friend." DelMornay. Okay. Mommy's already got a best friend. Oh, she's an Australian author. Okay. We have another Sienna. Ori! Did you know your princess called me today? Did I? Man, there's a lot to this book. I may only get one chapter read tonight. Yeah, she called me around 6:30, I guess. Just before 7, I told her I had to get off the phone so I could get my supper because I was fixing my macaroni and cheese, and I was going to have to eat and get ready for my live read. And then she asked me what time she could call me tomorrow, and I told her around noon. And she says, "Okay." And she says something about you, and I said, "Well, I get to talk to mommy too." And she's like, "No, you're my best friend. Mommy has one." So, and I told her that I have more than one best friend. And she pouted. And so when I was getting off the phone with her, I said, "I love you." And she wouldn't say anything. I said, "I love you, Marty." She wouldn't say anything. I said, "Fine, I'll talk to you tomorrow." She says, "Bye, brat." She's your brat. Just say she's your brat. Yeah, 9-year-old rules our lives. Alrighty. I saw where Carol may or may not be here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started because this chapter is really long, and I don't know how much I'm going to be able to read of the chapter. I mean, because it's really long. So we're going to go ahead and get started, and if Carol's able to get on, she can. If not, that's fine too. It's called My Sexy Voyeur, The Dom's Invitation, Book 1. It's by Carol DelMornay. And she's an Australia. That's the cover. She's an Australian author. Somebody holler at Jackie. She's forgotten. So she wanted me to read chapters 5, 6, and 7, possibly 8. And maybe all I can do to get through chapter 5, 6, and 7, and possibly 8. But I may not get past chapter 5 because this is a really long chapter. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And I am not reading it in an Aussie accent, so forget that too. Chapter 5, Sienna. By the end of the week, I was so damn tired. I'd unpacked as many boxes as I could Saturday night and arranged furniture all day Sunday. All my muscles ached. I'd woken up early to get to work and stopped in at the old place after work to put in an hour or so of cleaning each night. I'd sapped all of my energy and had taken a physical toll on me. But what really messed with me was when I accidentally saw the hot neighbor in the house behind as he walked around inside his house as naked as the day he was born. Hallelujah! Why that ever happened to me? Not being able to sleep while my mind conjured up images of him doing naughty things to me until all hours of the night was what really had me exhausted. Tonight, I was taking a break. She said that she may not be here because if she's not on here, it's just you three. Well, now there's somebody else, but it was just you three. Tonight, I was taking a break. I was going to stop in to visit Pixie and Sky. I crossed my fingers that asshole Clinton wasn't back. As I pulled into my old driveway, I didn't see his car. That's a good sign. I parked mine, got out, and locked it before I went over to knock on Pixie's front door. While I waited for her to open it, I heard Sky ask her who was at the door. I don't know until I open it, Sky, I heard Pixie answer patiently, and I smiled. I heard the snip of the lock being unlocked and saw the handle turn before it got pulled open. It's Sienna, Pixie yelled out, then wrapped me in a quick hug before Sky came barreling up to the door and threw herself at my legs, almost knocking me over. Enna, she greeted me excitedly, and I pried her chubby little arms from around my thighs to pick her up. Hello, beautiful, I said in between, plastering her face and neck with little kisses that made her giggle. Let Sienna get in the door, Sky, Pixie admonished with a smile. Come on, I'll give you a piggyback ride to the kitchen, I said, and shifted her from my front to my back. Ready? Ready, she squealed in my ear, and I winced with an exaggerated bounce of her body from hands I had tucked under her butt. I skipped down the hallway imitating a horse, complete with a whinny when I got to the stools in the kitchen, which had her in a fit of giggles. Hey, Carol. Okay, down you hop, I said as I took my hands out from beneath her butt and got down on my knees. Once she was off, I straightened back up and pulled 2 stools out, one for her and one for myself. Sky began to clamber up the side of the stool, so I picked her up and plonked her on the seat. Coffee? Pixie asked with a raised brow. Yes, please, I groaned. Yes, please, I groaned. You look tired, Pixie observed while she filled the kettle. Because I am, I confirmed with a sigh. Moving, cleaning, and working all week has freaking worn me out, I said, careful not to cuss in front of Sky. So, are you settled in yet? Did you get me some swings? Sky asked hopefully, and Pixie frowned. Sky, she said sternly, Sienna hasn't had time to get your swings to play on. I will, I promised her with a smile and a pat to the top of her leg. I won't forget. Why don't you go get your coloring book and some crayons, and I'll help you color while I'm visiting. Oh, my nose itches. When she nodded with a huge grin on her little face, I helped her down from the stool and she took off to her bedroom. No running in the house, Pixie yelled after her, and I laughed. You know she's only like this when you're around, right? What can I say? I shrugged my shoulders. I'm just a bad influence. That's right, Ori. I'm just a bad influence. Pixie poured the boiling water into the mugs, added some cold water to mine and milk to hers before she stirred, and slid my mug over the counter. Thanks, Pix. Pixie leaned one elbow on the bench and picked up her mug with her other hand while I stared at her over the rim of mine to take a sip of my hot coffee. I've been getting phone calls, Pixie said quietly while her eyes darted over to the hallway. Don't worry, she hastened to assure me. I'm not letting him back in, but he started to call me at all hours of the night. He's made subtle threats about taking Sky. My jaw clenched and my heart rate sped up. Are you worried he's just going to show up? Sky came barreling out of the hallway with a thick, tattered coloring book in one hand and a pencil case full of crayons in the other. Pixie forced a smile as she watched her little girl try to clamber up onto the stool next to mine without dropping anything. I leaned down and picked her up to set her gently on the stool. With a loud noise, she plunked the book down on the counter top and flicked through the turned up corners until she found a forest scene uncolored. Full of concentration, she unzipped the case, picked out a brown crayon, and handed it to me. Can you do the tree trunks, Anna? Course I can, I answered and began while she used a green one on the leaves. Pixie and I didn't finish our conversation. When I tried to talk in code, Pix shook her head and looked pointedly at Sky. When it was time for me to leave, Sky's pretty blue eyes filled with tears, and I left with a promise that I was going to buy her some swings next weekend. Fancy, did you holler, or either or even one of you, did you holler at Jackie? She knows how to block people that are being kind of rude. Tanner. Hello, Maxine. I greeted her, then stepped aside to allow her in. Just go straight out to the room tonight. No need to strip here. Okay, Master Tanner, she asked with some hesitation, then walked through my house to the room with the bifold doors. Tonight, I'm going to switch things up a little, I informed her. She didn't say anything or ask any questions because she knew better, but I did see her eyes widen with curiosity. Would you like a drink? I knew I'd shocked her. It was written all over her face. She automatically assumed I meant alcohol, but she knew my staunch rule regarding alcohol and play. They never mixed, and if either of us drank alcohol, that would mean there would be no play tonight. Coke, water? I asked, just to put those confused thoughts in her head to bed. Water, please, Master Tanner, she answered as relief relaxed her features. I left her standing in the room, still completely dressed. When I returned with 2 glasses of water, she looked ill at ease. I handed her a glass, then swept my hand in the direction of the couch against the far wall. Take a seat, Max. She still looked confused, but she knew if there was something I wanted her to know, I'd tell her. Max sat daintily on the edge of the seat next to me and sipped her cold water. My eyes roamed over the back fence, but I didn't see any further movement or light through the windows. Is she still home or has she gone back out? Looks like she's going to miss the show. Once Maxine finished her water, I drank the remainder of her own, then held the empty glass out to her. I'd like you to take these out to the kitchen, then come back in here and tease me with a strip show. With a sultry smirk, she grabbed my glass and took both of them to the kitchen. She put them in the sink so gently I only just heard a little tap when the bottom of the glass touched down on the stainless steel surface. When Max came back into the room, I took the remote out of my pocket and pressed play. Music started to softly play in the background. Maxine needed some inspiration. Even though she would have stripped for me at any rate, the beat now gave her some rhythm to work with. My eyes raked down what she was wearing. She'd followed my instructions to a T. Beautiful, figure-hugging, fire-engine red dress with straps over her shoulders that had enough leg on show to almost display what was on offer, but covered enough to allow your imagination plenty to work with. It hugged her body so tight, the outline of her corset showed. The black seamed stockings were sheer enough to see her beautiful creamy skin beneath, and the seam was as straight as an arrow as it disappeared up behind the short length of the hem that advertised the path to ecstasy. The blood red, frilly garter edged with tiny little bows. I think he's talking about there's this Karen, Abby, and Aaron that are on here. They started showing up last night, and they just throw out book titles and who wrote them. I mean, we don't know who they are or where they come from. So I got somebody coming that should show me how to block them. So we'll see. Occasionally on this, you get people on here that just pop in and you have to block them. So, um, the blood red frilly garter edged with tiny little bows, top and bottom, was in plain sight. Halfway up her left thigh, it matched the color of my ropes and the padded seat of the chair that she would soon be occupying. Her body moved to the beat, and she sensually rolled her hips. Maxine used one hand to slowly slide the strap off the opposite shoulder, then moved her hand to the other with her thumb extended to slide that strap off, so it hung halfway down her upper arm. It was wise she chose a dress with enough give in the material to stretch the straps until they slid completely off both arms. The continual sliding motion of her thumbs beneath her straps exaggerated the stretch the fabric was capable of. Once her arms were free, she hooked both of her thumbs through each strap and peeled the dress down to reveal the curves of her plumped up breast, edged with the fire engine red lace of the corset she wore beneath. Max Max continued to peel it away until she leaned forward, bent in half, then slid the scrunched up dress down to her feet. She took one foot out at a time, then threw it off to the side. When she folded her arms around behind her to undo the lacy bow that held her corset tight against her, I stopped her. Enough, I growled with one palm over my semi hard cock if in the front of my jeans. I want you wearing that on the chair. Her brows drew together slightly before she walked over to the chair and sat on the plush red seat. My whole attention was focused on Maxine. Miss Sexy was relegated to the back of my mind. Sienna. After my visit with Pixie and Sky, I pulled into my driveway and stifled a yawn while I waited for the roller door to lift. Once I parked and turned off my car, I stifled another one. God, I'm so damn tired. I was glad I decided to visit them, though. I'd missed the crazy peak hour traffic on the drive home. Once I unlocked the door into the house, I switched the entrance light on and walked straight through to the kitchen. I was desperate for a hot coffee to try and keep me awake long enough to at least unpack another couple of boxes. I threw my bag down on the countertop and picked up the kettle to take over to the sink to fill. I ran the tap enough to half fill the kettle, then returned to its base to switch it on. With the kettle started, I opened one cupboard beneath the counter and pulled out a mug. I wandered over and opened the pantry door, undid the lid on the coffee jar before I pulled out a drawer to retrieve a teaspoon, then put a heaped spoonful in my mug. Hope that's enough caffeine to keep me awake. After I replaced the jar and shut the pantry door, I put some cold water in my mug, then leaned my hip against the countertop to wait for the kettle to boil. Light caught my attention, and I turned to see where it was coming from. My gaze was immediately drawn to the house behind. In an instant, An image of him walking around naked invaded my mind, and I felt my face heat. I was about to stroll over and turn the kitchen light on when I noticed a woman dressed in a tight red dress enter the room with the opened bifold doors, with him walking in behind her. Ooh, he's not alone. I don't know why, but my mood suddenly took a dive. I knew it. He's taken. Even though he has someone before my very eyes, I couldn't seem to tear myself away from watching them. The opened curtains moved gently at each side of the doors, and I knew he opened them right up to allow the gentle cool breeze off the river into the house. It was only then I noticed shadows in a provocative dance on the far wall. His and her silhouettes painted a sensual picture in the flickering light of some burning candles. Lucky girl. I sighed wistfully and took my hand away from reaching for the light switch. I eventually tore my eyes away from them to pour the hot water into my mug. Once my coffee was made, I found myself drawn back to the window to watch what was unfolding. From the seductive movement of the one shadow on the wall, I couldn't quite work out what was going on, so I moved to stand in front of the sink for a better view straight through the doors he had opened. I sipped at my coffee and appreciated the bitter taste that slid down my throat. I no longer felt tired. Maybe the caffeine's working. I was completely glued to what was unfolding. The woman looked like she was performing a striptease for his pleasure. Her body moved so sensually. I knew she must be listening to some sort of music. It wasn't loud enough for me to hear anything, but the way she moved looked like she was keeping time with something. My brows rose when I saw her slowly peel her red dress off her body. Oh my gosh. When she tossed her dress away, she was left standing in a tight fitted red corset, black seamed stockings, and a garter that matched the seat of a chair I could see closer to the back wall. She looked so damn sexy. When I saw the guy stand up, my eyes were temporarily trained on him. Guess the strip show's over. Then he walked over to stand beside the chair I'd seen, and she stopped right in front of it. Enthralled, I watched him carefully sit her on the well-padded, blood-red seat. Then my jaw dropped open when he picked up a thick red cloth and placed it over her eyes before he tied it off behind her head. What the? He kneeled down in front of her, and my eyes widened when he thrust her legs apart, then tethered them one at a time around the ankle to the front legs of the chair with blood red rope. Oh, her hot flash kit. Yeah. Vincy, can you tell her what's in the hot flash kit? Because Nina's too busy playing with her toys and herself. Um, when he thrust her legs apart, then tethered them one at a time around the ankle to the front legs of the chair with blood red rope. He stood, then walked around behind her and came to a stop. His head lowered, and I swear I felt the slight brush of his lips as I watched him kiss the back of her neck. A shiver raced down the length of my spine when I saw his hands take possession of her wrist. The hairs stood up on the nape of my neck, and I absently reached one hand up to rub my heated palm over them to push them back down. He dragged her arms around the sides of the chair to behind her back. He kept them there with one hand while he slid the tie off from around his neck with the other. He wrapped it around his wrist and her wrist, and for a second, uh, I allowed my brain to let me pretend it was me on that chair. I drew my head back in shock at my reaction, and in the increasing heat I felt between my legs. My heart beat faster and harder as I moved a little to the left of the sink to get a better angle. I watched him leave the room. Where'd he go? My eyes flicked straight over the window to his kitchen, but I didn't see him. Then he re entered the room with something long, thin, and red in his hand. What is that? I have to quit looking at you guys. I gasped when I saw him slap one end down on the palm of his other hand. Is that a riding crop? Oh, geez, it is. There's an ambulance coming and the dogs are barking. A shiver of desire rippled through my womb as I clasped my hand between my legs. My palm filled with warmth and my eyes closed for a brief moment to savor the first tingle when the edge of a fingertip grazed along one side of my clit. What in the hell is wrong with me? I'm getting off perving on my neighbor. Totally disgusted with myself for becoming a peeping Tom, I reached out, pulled the cord to drop the blind, and covered the window. Out of sight, out of mind. Okay, the hot flash kit includes a fan, drink of your choice, whether it be alcohol or water or tea or whatever. Um, uh, if you want food, you can have food, and your vibrators or toys of choice, lube if you want it, whatever you need to enjoy a book like this. So we call those the hot flash kits, and we don't need the hot ones. They can use their imagination. What they got to do is what we want to do is hook them so they have to go buy the book. See, that's how this works. Okay, chapter 6, Sienna. All week, what I'd watched last Friday night was never far from my mind. So much for out of sight, out of mind, I snorted. It had played havoc with my body every night when I went to bed. I tried to use up all of my energy by sorting out my new place and making sure the old one was clean to a shine. I thought that would have exhausted me enough I'd fall asleep as soon as my head hit the pillow. But it hadn't worked that way. I'd lost count how many times it had helped to remember him thwack that riding crop against the palm of his hand while I edged myself to dive headfirst into ecstasy. My imagination conjured up thoughts of what it would feel like if I was thwacked on my ass. Those thoughts pushed me into oblivion every single time. I'd tried to avoid my kitchen and dining room for the whole week. I'd even resorted to buying takeout for dinner since Wednesday night just so I didn't have to stand in my kitchen to cook myself in anything to eat. Every time I entered the kitchen, my eyes were automatically drawn to the window in search of him. I'd seen brief glimpses of his bronzed body as he passed by rooms with a window view until I decided I couldn't just perv on him for my sexual gratification every night using my fingers or my toys. Hell, I could. Which reminds me, I walked down to my bedroom and brought my pink and white mini wand out to charge on my laptop. Last night's effort alerted me to the fact it really needed to be charged. Friday night, I found myself at home in front of the idiot box as I tried to find something on Netflix that grabbed my interest. But I was thirsty. Where did I put that bottle of vodka? In the freezer or fridge? Do I have any lemonade? I got up to go and check. First stop was the fridge. Oh, they're allowed to add anything they want. Yeah, that's all part of the kid, and to each his own. Whatever they prefer. Um, I mean, hell, they can add a partner for all I care. But yeah, they get kind of kinky, and I wasn't thinking, or I'd have brought my little handy toy in here tonight. But I wasn't thinking when I came in here. I was too busy watching TV before I came in here. I was watching Gunsmoke. I got up to go and check. First stop was the fridge. As I opened the freezer compartment, my eyes drifted over to the window. I just couldn't resist. I froze with my hand on the handle. Fuck. He'd opened up one side of the bifold doors. He was only wearing black sweatpants, and I almost drooled. Once he opened the other side, he stood in the doorway, and it appeared his focus was trained up on my kitchen window. Fuck! I'd retreated to the edge and hoped like hell he hadn't seen me perving on him. But the urge to ogle that toned body was just too hard to ignore, and I edged slowly back around the side of the frame. That magnificent body was kickboxing the heavy punching bag he had hung under the roof of his patio, and I groaned with barely contained lust. Strength and power were evident in his kick from his lower leg and foot as it connected with a thud to the side of the bag. It was loud enough I heard it while I stood in my kitchen. The bag swayed back and forth from the force of it. Jeez. I began to feel hot. After I removed my jumper, I laid it across the end of the large L of the countertop. My breathing became quick and shallow as I watched the sheen of sweat glisten on the surface of his muscular back under the fluorescent lights he had turned on. My hand gravitated between my legs, and I felt the intense heat that had been generated by the vision of such a gorgeous specimen moving his body so masterfully, so aggressively. He oozed authoritative control. An image of him slapping the riding crop down on the palm of his hand briefly appeared in my head, and I groaned while I closed my eyes to relish the increased desire that image provoked. My thighs clenched and increased the pleasant feeling to snake throughout my entire body. I had to reach a hand out to brace myself and steady the sudden shake in my knees. When I opened my eyes, I saw the box and bag had stopped swaying. My eyes frantically searched his whole backyard, then focused on every window I saw along the back of his house. But he was nowhere to be seen. Where in the hell has he gone? He can't have vanished into thin air. Disappointment swamped through me, and I hung my head dejectedly. I'd have to finish what he'd started. The level of arousal he had woken in me wanted satisfying. No, it needed satisfying. The ache was unbearable. With a sigh, I swung the freezer door closed, turned from the window, and shed my clothes on my way to my room. I was naked when I walked through my bedroom doorway, and I headed over to the ensuite to dump my clothes in the hamper in the corner before I turned the shower on. I couldn't be bothered to wash my hair, so I swept it up in my hands and held it in a high lift while I opened the top drawer and pulled out a hair tie. After I'd put it in a ponytail, I twisted the length to wrap around the hair tie until it was resembled a bun, then pinned it at either side. Satisfied it was tied enough to escape the water, I stepped in and altered the temperature. As I eased myself under the needle spray, I reached up and adjusted the shower rose down from the water to hit over my chest instead of my head. I turned around so the warmth flowed down my back, then stretched one hand out to the tiled wall while the other went between my legs. My eyes closed as I widened my stance and palmed my pussy. I separated my ring and index fingers to slide back up the outside of my smooth lips as I trailed my middle finger along the seam. As I reached the top of my slit, I pushed the tip of my middle finger through the tap on my clit. Little shocks of pleasure burst through my core until I couldn't resist the urge to slide it between my lips to my entrance. I inserted my finger one knuckle deep then dragged it back up to my clit. The tip of my finger wasn't wet enough, so I opened my eyes, removed my hand, and grabbed the bar of soap out of the dish. With a quick wipe of it between my legs, I returned the soap, then put my hand back between my legs. A sigh escaped as the tip of my finger skated over my clit, and I closed my eyes as I began to draw slow circles with an occasional flick across the top until it hardened into a little pebble. I increased the speed of my fingertip and rocked my hips back and forth as my breath grew short and my mouth dried out. Tension built in my core as an image of the crop smacked down on his open palm. My breast felt swollen and heavy while sparks of intense pleasure shot out in every direction. My finger moved faster, harder, my breath grew ragged, and my hips rocked as the urge to come grew. Over and over, the way he had smacked the crop on his hand played in my mind on repeat until it turned into an image of it being cracked over my ass. I sucked in a ragged breath as I reached the point of no return. My lungs burned, unable to expel the air trapped inside them as my mind blanked. My clit throbbed, my inner walls rippled, and my abdomen hardened. My body shuddered with an eruption of pleasure, with satisfying yet gentle waves of ecstasy, like water in a lake, slowly lapping at the sandy shore. Even though my orgasm had been brief and light, my legs almost crumpled beneath me. I fell against the tiled wall so hard, I almost popped my shoulder out. Fuck, that hurt. I brought my one hand up and rubbed the rounded end as aftershock spasmed through me at regular intervals. Damn it! Next time I won't do this while I'm standing. It's much easier and more enjoyable when I'm lying on the bed. Once I regained control, I washed all over, rinsed off, then turned off both the taps off at the same time. After I opened the door, I stepped out onto the mat and reached for my towel. While I dried myself, I glanced at my reflection in the mirror. I wasn't sure if I was flushed from the heat of the water or from my orgasm. It had been a quick release, but I didn't feel sated, not in the way I felt when I laid on the bed and used one or more of my toys. I hung my towel back up, then wandered into my walk in robe and selected a nice, comfortable pink dress with a unicorn motif on the front and a pair of black canvas shoes. As I padded over to my tall boy, I threw the dress over the end of my bed, dropped the shoes on the floor, then walked over to pull out a drawer. I chose a lacy black G string and matching bra. Once I stepped into the G string, I pulled them up, then reached for my bra. I threaded my arms through and fitted the cups around my breast. After I reached around to do up the clasp, I rearranged both boobs to sit properly and leaned forward to snatch up the dress. After I threaded my arms through the straps, I pulled it up over my head and down my body. Once I straightened it, the hem set mid-thigh. I slipped my feet into the canvas shoes and headed to the kitchen. Now it's time for a nice hot chocolate before I find something to watch on Netflix. Before I reached the kettle in the corner of the counter, some small movement caught the corner of my eye. I gasped in a quick breath when I saw him and ducked off to the side away from the window. Fuck me! He was dressed in a damn suit, and from the quick glance I had, he wore it extremely well. When I peeked back around the edge, I saw his tall, staunch shadow cast on the wall behind him. It was so seductive and powerful. It was purely magnetic. He raised both arms and extended them straight out in front of him. I sucked in a startled breath and wondered why he had done that, or if he had seen me as I peeked around the edge. I haven't got the light on. Surely he can't see me while I'm standing in the dark. He had the handle of his riding crop in one hand, with the thin end of the leather keeper laid across the palm of the other. Oh, geez, despite the orgasm I just had in the shower, burgeoning arousal overtook my body in a flood of need. As he raised the crop a few inches, then slapped it down against his palm. An electrifying quiver shook me to the core, and I couldn't contain the small whimper that choked out of my throat. One hand gravitated between my legs. My index finger slid down the outer side of my thong, then pushed through under the lace edge of it. It was like being in the shower all over again as I slid the tip down through the top of my slit. But this time, when I dipped it in my opening, it got soaked with my juice. The silky feel of it as it slipped back and forth through my wet lips elevated my heartbeat and increased the heat coursing through my veins. My eyes narrowed and my lips parted when I flicked over the top of my still swollen and sensitive clit. I felt it harden beneath the pad of my finger. How can I feel so turned on after I had an orgasm in the shower not more than 10 minutes ago? Yeah, or you better be drinking you some water. You're going to need it. He let the hand with the handle of the crop down to his side as he approached the doorway. He lifted his other arm above his head and wrapped his hand around the top of the door frame as he slowly tapped the leather keeper against the outside of his trouser leg. I moaned when I felt another rush of cream warmly cover more of my finger. He released his grip on the door frame and stretched out his arm, then pointed his finger straight at me. Jeez, fuck! I gasped aloud in shock as my eyes widened and my hand dislodged from between my legs as I took a quick step backward. He crooked his finger like he was beckoning me to come to him. My heart skipped a beat, then pounded wildly against my ribs. He beckoned again. I stepped forward, closer to the window as my brows furrowed. He stepped aside and waved his arm in a sweeping invitation, straight to the empty chair with the red ropes secured around the front legs. Fucking hell! Excitement raced through me so fast it left my head in a spin. My blood pumped through my veins at a rate of knots, heightening the need that built within me. I watched him walk with confident strides around the back of the chair. My mouth dried out as I watched the erotic way he dragged the leather keeper over the top of the chair. While he balanced the rounded leather on one end, he pulled the left sleeve of his suit up, turned his wrist, then tapped the face of his watch with a firm and impatient point of his right index finger. My brows shot straight up to my hairline when what he had insinuated dawned on me. Oh my fucking word. He'd given me a time limit to make a decision. Should I accept the invitation? Oh, fuck. On legs that shook, I made my way to the front door. Do I have time to read the rest of it? Let's see. Tanner. After I devoted all my attention to Maxine during the scene, I was afforded a little downtime while I cared for her. My fingers stroked through her hair while her head rested in my lap. Then I fed her strawberries. Hope you enjoyed the show, Miss Sexy. I smirked and my eyes darted back up to the now closed kitchen window. The rapid way the blinds had been shut had caught my attention for a moment after I'd tied Maxine to the chair. How long had she watched? I tried to think when I first seen her silhouette in the window. It was right before Maxine began her little striptease. I recalled with a grin after I replayed the sequence of events through my mind. She'd watched right up until I brought the crop into the room. She's either turned right off or turned right on. The rapid snap of the blinds was definitely one or the other. And I was counting on her being turned right on. Once Maxine left in the taxi, I wandered back into the room and made my way over to the open bifold doors. Reaching one hand up, I wrapped my fingers around the frame and closed my eyes to appreciate the gentle breeze blowing in off the river. As my eyes opened, I flicked a quick look up to the kitchen window and smirked when I recalled how fast Miss Sexy had shut them before I moved back. Grabbing one side of the doors, I stretched out to grip the other side, then pulled them closed. I flicked the lock and drew the heavy curtains across them. On my way to my bedroom, I checked all the curtains and blinds were closed. Saturday and Sunday, I didn't have to get up early, and the last thing I wanted was the sunrise to stream through anywhere in the house to wake me up. Oh my gosh, I love to be woke up like that. Um, Before I knew it, the weekend was over. While I dressed for the office on Monday morning, my thoughts turned to Miss Sexy. She had kept a low profile. I hadn't caught a single glimpse of her all weekend. Is that turned off by what is she that turned off by what she saw me do to Max? That was the only explanation that really made any sense. Miss Sexy had been on my mind all week. I hadn't had a glimpse of her at all. If I hadn't seen any lights on in the house, I would have guessed she was either away or worked longer hours than I did. By Wednesday, Miss Sexy had burrowed even further under my skin. A plan began to formulate in my head. But if she was to start determined to stay out of sight, I didn't know how I was going to implement it. Thursday morning, I called Maxine and canceled our usual Friday night scene. She didn't ask for a reason, but I heard the question in her voice. You've done absolutely nothing wrong, Max, I reassured her. I just want a break. I'll call you if I change my mind. You can always go to Obsidian. No, Master Tanner, she responded demurely but politely. I trust you. No one else at the moment. I felt a pang of guilt. I knew the reason behind Max's trust issue. She'd been taken advantage of by a wannabe Dom who had ignored her list of limits. She was a lot more cautious now and trusted her gut instinct. There's always Jewel Tobin, I suggested. Oh, her voice rose in surprise. I thought Master Tobin was seeing Summer Borden. He's currently only seeing Summer at the club. They're not exclusive. Would you like me to call Jewel? I offered when her hesitation lasted longer than a few seconds. I imagined her thinking about it, biting on her bottom lip. Why don't you just go to the club to hang out? I'll phone Jewel, and if you both happen to be there at the same time, you can take it from there. Okay, she finally agreed. Thank you, Master Tanner. You're welcome, Max. After ending the call to Max, I made a quick call to Jewel, just like I promised her I would. When Jewel indicated he had approached her in the club if he saw her, I knew from the interested tone of his voice that he'd wanted to spend some time getting to know her to see where things could lead. When I eventually pulled into my garage on Friday night, a smirk pulled at my lips and adrenaline pumped through my body. Miss Sexy was home when I drove past. I was itching to see if I could catch a glimpse of her as she'd been pretty elusive the whole week. Once I entered the house, I loosened off the tie around my neck and unbuttoned my white shirt before I pulled it out of my trousers on my way to my bedroom. I toed off my black dress shoes in the walk-in robe and kicked them in underneath my neat row of suits. Shrugging my shirt off on my way through the bathroom door, I slid the button and zipper undone on my trousers before I shed them too. I took my socks off before I tossed everything in the laundry hamper, with my shirt landing on the top of the pile. Naked. I walked back into my bedroom and sauntered over to the two set of drawers on the opposite wall. After I selected a pair of black sweatpants from the third drawer, I pulled them on and made my way out to the kitchen. I stopped at the fridge, opened the door, and grabbed a bottle of water, then continued on through my secondary playroom. Once I slid the heavy curtains open, I unlocked and opened the bifold doors. The cool breeze instantly wafted through the doors into the house. I flicked the switch to light up the fluorescent along the roof of the patio, Hope they don't attract too many bugs tonight. I began to methodically work through my stretches while my eyes focused on the house behind until I was ready to commence. I positioned myself so my view into Miss Sexy's kitchen window was unobstructed. When I saw her silhouette walk into her kitchen, I almost lost my focus. My foot only just connected against the heavy bag hanging from the main beam. Keeping her in my peripheral vision, my lips curled up and I kicked the bag with added strength, which sent it rocking. When I saw her take her jumper off, she must be getting a little hot under the collar. With adrenaline spiking through my systems, I laid it in a volley of punches, punctuated with a few roundhouse kicks. Sweat began to trickle between my shoulder blades, under my arms, and down each side of my face. With one final kick, the bag swayed dangerously. As I sucked in oxygen, I wandered back in through the large opening and made my way to the shower. With a smirk settling over my face, I turned the taps on and removed my sweatpants, dropping them in the basket on my way to the shower recess. Once I was freshly clean, I selected a deep gray suit from the rail, then turned to select a pale blue button down shirt from the opposite one, taking the items with me to throw them across the bottom corner of my bed before I proceeded to dress. Once I'd selected and secured my tie, I retrieved a pair of socks, pulled them on, then slipped my feet into my black dress shoes before I walked out of my room. On my way to the kitchen, I made a slight detour to the corner of the lounge and picked up one of my favorite implements before I resumed my path. Only stopping once, I stood in the middle of the wide open doors of my casual playroom. My eyes immediately focused on Miss Sexy in her kitchen. Then I chuckled when she obviously noticed me and ducked quickly out of my line of sight. "Come on, Miss Sexy," I silently coaxed as I willed her to beckon to become curious. When I saw her slowly poke her head back around the edge of the frame, I lifted my arms straight out in front of me, palms up so she could see what I had balanced on them before I secured my grip around the handle. I raised the leather end a few inches, then slapped the keeper against the palm of my hand. She moved further around the edge of the frame, and if I wasn't so focused on her every movement, I would have missed the slight motion of her arm. My lips stretched into a wide grin when I determined her hand was now down between her legs. That a girl. Let me do it Vincey's way. That a girl. I dropped both hands back down to my sides, keeping a firm grip on the woven leather handle of my red crop. Taking a couple of steps, I raised my left arm and wrapped my hand around the top of the door frame, absently tapping the leather keeper against the side of my trouser-clad leg. "It's time I encouraged you, Miss Sexy." I took my hand away from the frame, stretched my arm now, and pointed my finger right at her. A quiet chuckle left my throat when I saw her take a startled step backwards. Turning my extended hand around, I used my finger to beckon her to come to me. I waited and saw her take a tentative step closer to the window, so I beckoned once more. There's no way she could misinterpret my invitation. Perhaps I need to be a little more definitive. I knew you'd like that. I stepped aside and made a sweeping invitation with my free arm to indicate the empty chair she'd seen me use with Max. With measured strides, I walked over behind the chair and dragged the leather keeper slowly over the back of it as I stood behind it. I decided she had enough time to allow her curiosity to spike. With the leather keeper folded on top of the chair, I pushed the sleeve up on my left wrist and folded my arm in front of me. With my right forefinger, I firmly tapped the face of my watch. The corners of my lips twitched, then broke into an excited grin when I saw her hesitation end and watched her disappear from my view. Now I just had to wait for her to arrive at my front door. Oh, look at the time. I can't read anymore. Oh my goodness. Guess what? You bitches got to go buy the book so you can read it. Find out what happens. So, $2.99 on all platforms. Yes, I love it. And again, it's called My Sexy Voyeur, The Dom's Invitation, Book 1. And there's your cover. Well done, Miss Carol. Yes. Come back when we get yourself on the books for book 2, because we gonna need it. I got a bunch of horny bitches in here, and they gotta have this stuff every now and then. Although I try not to read it every night. Yes, I know. You guys love me anyway. So, alrighty. Now, Ben. Don't even know what's on the books for tomorrow night. You guys know I'm horrible at this. Okay, let's go there. Whoa. Let's go there. Let's go there. Anybody know what's going on tomorrow night? Any of my PAs? I got 16 of you. Tell you what, good help's hard to find around here. Tomorrow night's Thorn, I think. Right? By R.B. O'Ryan. An innocent young woman, an older damaged man, one dark contract, a dark romance. So, alrighty, tomorrow night is Thorn by R.B. O'Brien. Excuse me. So, thank you, Miss Carol, for letting me read it. I greatly appreciate it. This was very interesting and very entertaining. So I will have to go back and read the book at some point. Don't expect it anytime in the near future because I have like 50 books started already. So, but at some point I will get around to reading it and leaving a review for you. Alrighty, so everybody have a great evening. Have a good day at work tomorrow, and you have a great day today. Since I know this is morning time for you, Miss Carol. Oh, Frankie says hi, y'all. He says hey. He loves his name. So, alrighty, you guys have a great evening and happy reading.